Hello everyone and welcome to another game you guys requested from the European Club Cup. It is from the penultimate round and it features world number 10 Gukesh and world number, well, depending on which day it is, 4 or 5, Arjun Erigaisi. And both of them are doing incredibly well in the tournament, both of them without a single loss. Now they face each other. Obviously a great matchup, and the game doesn't just feature immense preparation, but also immense chess, which, no one likes to see, someone blitzing out 20 moves and then just winning without even thinking throughout the game. Even though the games can be spectacular, you just, you appreciate it more when you've also done the work over the board. And that's what this game brings us. So let's check it out. Very exciting game. Gukesh, the world classical champion with white, opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5, knight f3, knight to f6, and pawn to g3. Okay, preparing bishop to g2. It's going to be some sort of, this officially is called the Tartakov attack, but yeah, some sort of a Catalan structure it will be. We have pawn to c5. This is actually the 5th most popular continuation. E6 is more common than anything else. Pawn to c6. You can also go bishop to f5, g6. But here we have pawn to c5, and now we go into a very specific force line that I always urge you to keep in mind on the clock, as the players are playing incredibly fast and they know all this stuff. So bishop to g2, c captures on d4, and now you don't recapture right away because then you invite pawn to e5, and queen captures on d4, then you invite knight to c6, so it's not that good. Castles kingside by Gukesh, and now pawn to g6. This is maybe the 3rd or 4th most popular. H6 is almost always played here. Sometimes they go knight to c6, but here we have g6, testing Gukesh's preparation, and Gukesh instantly plays knight captures on d4. So he knows all the ins and outs of all of these replies. Bishop g7, c4, we have castles kingside, and now c captures on d5. Again, Gukesh, without spending more than a few seconds on each move, knight captures on d5, and now you almost always go knight to c3. There are hundreds of games in top-level competition with this exact same position, but here we have knight to b3, and this is already somewhat rare. We have knight b6 offering a queen trade, and there is a top-level game Maxime Vachier-Lagrave played against Wei Yi in Lyon Masters in 2015. That was 10 years ago. But here we have pawn to a4, and it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. And if you saw this move in bullet, you go a5 immediately. Because from experience, it's just good. And indeed, it is the top move recommended by the engine. Also, knight to c4. But here we have bishop to e6 by Arjun, investing some 12 minutes into the idea. And it is a pretty deep idea. It is inviting pawn to a5. But if you do this, then you have to calculate everything, as did Arjun in those 12 minutes. For example, captures, bishop captures on b3, and now rook d3. It's a temporary piece sacrifice, but you will win either the bishop or the knight. And now look at this. Rook c8 attacks the undefended bishop. Bishop to f4. And now knight to d5. Okay, now you win the piece back. Bishop captures, rook captures. You also win the pawn on b2. And now after rook a2, you have this bishop to c1 annoyance. And now knight d2. So your upper pawn is black, but that bishop is very awkwardly placed, and you're not looking to give it up for a knight. So it would be a very interesting position to play. Black should be a little bit better because you are up a pawn. White is a lot up, in development. But if you're not just dead lost, then you're going to be okay. So that is at least one of the lines that Arjun had to work out by playing bishop to e6. But Gukesh not interested. He just plays rook captures on d8, and this is the first move where he actually spent some time investing 3 minutes into the queen trade. Rook captures and pawn to a5. And okay, now it's a little bit different. Bishop captures on b3. We have a captures on b6. Knight to c6, and bishop captures on c6. Giving up the light square bishop. Never an easy thing to do because you're used to this bishop being the strongest piece on the board. But here it just works tactically. B captures on c6. And now I'm sure you're looking at b7. And it looks like such a nice idea. You capture on a7 and you're very happy with the passed pawn on b7. The problem is this bishop to d4 move. And now, while you can go after this pawn, let's say captures and captures, now all of a sudden bishop d5. And where is the rook going? Only square a6, and now bishop to c4. We'll pick up the e2 pawn. You're not up in material. Yes, you will have the passed b pawn, which is usually great, but here with 2 rooks and 2 bishops on the board, it is very unlikely that that pawn will become more than a permanent target. So after b captures on c6, we have rook captures on a7. This is by far the best. And now there is a move you should play here. I'm not even going to tell you which move it is. Even feel free to pause the video, because if Arjun does not play this move, he is just lost. So what would you play here as black? It's not an easy question. Yes, only one move, and that is bishop to d4. And now, okay, rook captures on e7, you capture on b6, and everything is perfectly fine. You're up in development a little bit. You have the bishop pair. You're down a pawn, but you have compensation. However, after rook captures on a7, Arjun played rook 8 to b8, and now he is either lost or close to lost, depending on who's playing. With perfect play, probably you are lost. But what did he miss here? What's the problem with rook to b8? It seems like nothing. But what's the problem? While I give you a couple of seconds. So the only problem is the one that Gukesh finds, and that is bishop to f4. And probably not the first move you think of. Probably the first move you think of is just defend the pawn and your life is great. But then bishop d4, and the pawn is lost. So that doesn't work. However, after playing bishop to f4, you cannot capture the pawn due to bishop to c7. So it's shrewd maneuvering using tactics, because now pawn to e5, you block the bishop, and now bishop back to e3. Gukesh did not play. Gukesh played bishop to g5 because it seems like you need the move. A rook would be, for white at least better placed on e8 than on here controlling the entire d file. But it's actually better to just leave the rook there. For example, you go bishop to e3 right away, and now what do you play? Rook d to c8, because white wants to pick up the pawn with this, and then you go knight to d2. You win a tempo on that bishop. Then you go knight e4, for example, knight c5, knight b7, knight a5. You put more pressure on that pawn. You will play b4 to stop c5 permanently, and just make a target out of that. And positionally, it is lost for black. But after e5, Gukesh went bishop g5. Okay, rook to e8, bishop back to e3, and now bishop to f8, trying to get that c5 in, but knight to d2, attacking the bishop, bishop to d5, and now rook to c1, preventing c5 from ever being played. Rook e back to d8, as it really has no business being on the e file. And now, again, you should go knight c4 right away. For some reason, Gukesh really doesn't like that rook on d8. Rook to d6 and bishop back to e3, as the bishop is crucial there. We have rook d back to d8, I guess hoping for a repetition here, but of course not. Knight to c4. And the problem is, you could defend this pawn. Let's say you just play pawn to f6. White's position is just so overwhelming. For example, knight a5, this is the square where we need the knight. And now after, let's say, rook dc8, you have to defend that pawn, rook to c7. And there's no way to defend this. You're going to lose that pawn, and then the b pawn is just winning. Or you trade, and once the pawn is defended, that's pretty much it. It even runs into a terrible tactic. Bishop d6, you're hoping to win the pawn, but now after knight captures, you cannot capture it, because after captures, there's this monster fork here, knight e7 check, and black resigns. So after knight c4, we have pawn to c5, giving up the pawn this way, and knight captures on e5, and now rook captures on b6. And the question is, what do you play here? There's only one way to win, and it's definitely not an easy one to find. So while I give you a couple of seconds. Knight to d7 is what Gukesh played, and that is not the most precise way. The most precise way is rook d7. You force a rook trade, and now after rook captures and knight captures, obviously you have to move the rook. Rook captures on b2. Now you play knight f6 check, and now it's game over. You pick up the bishop, and that's it. So seems simple, but it's never simple when you're the one playing. And already 6 minutes on the clock at move 24. Knight d7 was played. This is very good, just not as good. We have rook captures on b2, and now bishop to g5. Again, Gukesh with the bishop to g5 move, but here it has a tactical background. We have rook to a8, offering a trade of rooks. Knight f6 check, we have king to h8, and knight captures on d5. We have rook captures on a7, and bishop to f6 check. going after the rook on b2. So you have to defend with bishop to g7, bishop captures, and rook captures on c5. And this is the end result. Gukesh is now up a pawn, but it's not a pass pawn. It's 4 versus 3 on the same side of the board. Not something that can easily be won. And objectively, this position is equal, with Gukesh having 3 minutes on the clock, with 9 more moves to be made to reach time control. So, okay, pawn to h5. Both players just start improving the position of their kings. We have rook to c2, kicking away the bishop, but rook b7 defending, and pawn to e4. Gukesh will, of course, try everything. We have bishop to e5, and now pawn to f4. Chasing away the bishop, we have rook to b2, forcing a rook trade, rook captures, and bishop captures. Now we have a knight and bishop where you're up a pawn. Now, you know, over the last 150 years, it's now, especially with the use of engines, we know that it is possible to hold this a draw. When Steinitz said, "Okay, you give me a pawn, it's a game over." I mean, you cannot hold being down a pawn. And while we know that almost every position is a draw, when you're the one actually playing, being down a pawn means so much. So pawn to e5, we have bishop to d4, and king to f3. We have king to f8, king to e4, and now bishop to g1. Going after the h2 pawn, knight to c3 by Gukesh. And this is move 40 for Arjun. He has 7 minutes on the clock to make his move, and he chooses poorly. What would you play here? Probably your uncle would play it as well. I mean, you just capture a pawn, and that's it. And that is, you know, a perfectly fine move, which holds the position. Or even pawn to h4, or even king to e7. It's all fine. But after king to g7, now he runs into problems. And, you know, it's, I mean, that's the wonder of chess. King on e7 draw, king on g7 is a loss. Because Gukesh now plays... and it's not even a situation where only one move wins the game. Pretty much any move wins the game here, because the king just does not belong on g7. But Gukesh even, you know, makes a little bit fun with the position. Knight e2. And now if you capture, then king f3, and the bishop is lost. The knight covers g1 and g3. That's it. So, of course, you have to go back. Bishop to b6 was played. h3, we have bishop to a5, and now pawn to f5. And the king is just... terribly placed on g7. f6 is coming, so whatever you play, let's say you play bishop b6, you go pawn f6 check, king to h6, and now knight e4. Knight d4, and okay, that e6 is coming. You're gonna create a passed f pawn and win the game this way. So Arjun made a heavy decision. He played captures on f5, king captures on f5, and now bishop to d8, knight to f4, and now king to h6. We have knight to d5, king to g7, and knight to f6. Of course, you cannot trade, because this position with minor pieces of the board would be, of course, completely winning. So the bishop is your only chance. We have king to h6, pawn to h4, and now bishop to a5. We have knight to e4, bishop back to d8, and now knight to g5, and you cannot keep defending this, because if you go king to g7, yes, you defend the pawn, but look at this, e6, and you cannot trade. You're going to lose that pawn. Of course, the king and pawn endgame is still winning for white, and if you capture, then knight captures with check, picks up the bishop. So after knight g5, Arjun had to play it. He gave up the bishop. We have h captures on g5 check, king g7, and now you could easily still mess up, but Gukesh is, surgically precise, goes pawn to g6, and that's just it. A temporary pawn sacrifice to gain the opposition, very instructive. F captures king g5, and he was in this position on move 53 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. If you go the king side, then you just advance the pawn to victory. If king f7, then you go king h6. And now after king wherever, king t6, or if you go up the board, you still capture the pawn. You just gobble up everything, and once you capture, it's the g pawn. And even if it was the h pawn, it doesn't matter, because the white king is much closer. Couple of more moves, g4, you could still blunder the game. G5 would be a draw. You have to gain the opposition, and then wherever the king goes, you just gain another opposition, and then again, wherever the king goes, you win the 3 crucial squares, and then you just promote the pawn to victory. So Arjun was very, very close to becoming the best board one of the European Club Cup, but that honor goes to Gukesh, as he played brilliantly. He achieved a 4 out of 5. I think I have it here somewhere. 4 out of 5, over 2,900 performance, and just stellar showing. Sergey Movsesyan, Max Varmerdam, those were victories. Anish Giri a draw, Arjun Erigaisi a victory, and then in the final round with black he drew Vladimir Fedoseev. So incredible performance. And also, let me just load this up. I have it here somewhere. Yeah, there we go. These are the updated world top, let's say 24. So just to see, who's doing what. Magnus still chilling with 28.39. Hikaru lost a little bit of rating. Fabiano won some in the US Chess Championship. Vincent Keimer, five places. He went from number 9 to number 4. With 27.72. Anish also won some points. Arjun dropped 2 points. Prague dropped 2 points. Wesley at number 8. And Gukesh, after having to bounce back in the top 10, now he's even world number 9 and working his way towards world number 5 and, hopefully beyond. Not a lot happening in below. Okay, we have a Rapport. Richard Rapport also won 16 points. He's now world number 15. Levon also played some nice games, won some points. Yuan Yi won some points. MVL, 2 points, but okay. Not bad. So yeah, brilliant play by Gukesh, worthy of a world champion. Had he found that Rook D7 move, I would call it a masterpiece. Without it, it's a fine showing against Arjun. But I'm sure people wish that they could have a fine showing against Arjun. If you've seen what Arjun did to Vincent Keimer, I mean that was absolutely spectacular. So yeah, brilliant stuff by Gukesh. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Gerard St. Pierre, Brazos Valley Chess Society, Francesco Corradi, Uzi Shalev, and Frank W.H. Schaefer for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.